My name is Dylan Maloney. I'm a junior from Greenwich High School in Connecticut.
I'm Max Fincher, a junior from Greenwich High School.
I'm Carl Fryer, a junior from Greenwich High School. And we have Aaron Hull, our head coach, our We the People team head coach, Peggy Moore, our assistant coach, and Duke Maloney, another assistant coach.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thanks to the teachers and coaches. All right, you know the drill. I'm going to read the question all the way through. When I stop talking, you can begin your presentation and Ellen will start the clock, okay? Richard Posner wrote that the American public worries more about invasions of privacy than about summary proceedings against suspected terrorists, curtailments of the freedom of speech of the law-abiding, or the right of the media to publish government secrets. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? Why or why not? To what extent, if any, is privacy in jeopardy today? And what protection, if any, do people have from privacy violations by governments or businesses?
Richard Posner's belief that the American public is more focused on invasions of privacy is completely founded in reality. Americans care for their privacy because each time it's infringed upon, it feels as though the government is barging into one's personal life. The entire inspiration for the right to privacy in the Third and Fourth Amendments is from the pre-revolution era when the British barged in on unsuspecting Americans. The Supreme Court applied First, Third, Fourth, and Ninth Amendments to create a right to privacy in Griswold v. Connecticut. With regards to towards cell phones, the right to privacy requires a warrant to view someone's location history. Of course, wartime powers have effectively been used to make decisions null and void.
Our privacy is in constant danger through data collection by the government and private businesses. Time and time again, the US government has collected data and infringed upon our constitutional rights in the name of security, while using this to survey people on a much larger scale. Exposed by Edward Snowden, corporations, specifically telephone companies and tech giants, have provided the government with a wealth of information on unsuspecting Americans, including cell phone records, text messages, and emails. And while the government has claimed that they've ended their surveillance, there are still many cases of unwarranted government surveillance, with one notable case being of Agran Hasbashrami, who is accused of supporting a terrorist organization after the government illegally searched his email.
Technically speaking, the Fourth and 14th Amendments are supposed to protect the individual from warrantless breaches of information beyond the reasonable expectation of privacy. That being said, the USA Patriot Act infringes on this protection on a number of occasions. Giving law enforcement easier access to wiretapping and sneak and peek searches creates a slippery slope that results in further invasion of privacy. As a matter of fact, Americans feel so unprotected because the Patriot Act is most commonly invoked to surveil minor crimes. Most Americans would do whatever it takes to thwart terrorism, but the more domestic the issue gets, the more evident it becomes that this is not what they signed up for.
Although Americans do worry about their privacy, the majority, at 79%, have zero understanding of how the government uses their data. Data released to the government guarantees a result of further scrutiny for the individual, which no one wants. The temptation for the government to use data filtered through their systems irresponsibly creates the potential for domestic secret police. The only protection Americans have from the government on their devices is from warrantless searches of their cell phones, per the decisions in Carpenter v. US and Riley v. California.
Even worse than the government, however, are companies who constantly collect your information for their own benefit. Whenever you log onto a website, it immediately starts tracking your cookies, small amounts of data that records browsing history amongst other things. Most companies store this data and sell it for a profit, circulating your information to new and unknown groups, destroying any semblance of privacy that you had when browsing the internet. Even if a company does not sell your data, they can still use it themselves to reveal more about your personal life, something Target took advantage of to target pregnant women. Additionally, Facebook has had multiple scandals regarding the privacy of their users and the protection of their data. In 2018, the data of 87 million users was given to Cambridge Analytica due to the mismanagement by Facebook, a clear threat to the privacy of their users.
Unfortunately, the American people have little protection from having their privacy infringed upon by private companies. Given that most applications or websites require signature into a privacy policy, the only way to avoid the issue is by abstaining from the media source entirely. But this is not a fair choice for Americans to make. One bill that has made headway is California's Consumer Privacy Act, which went into effect this year and gives consumers the right to deny businesses sale or use, in some cases, of one's data. There's little passed at the national level at this point, since many fear that more general policies could undermine stricter state laws, making the situation even worse. The best chance of protection that Americans have in the future is Representative Ro Khanna's Internet Bill of Rights proposal, which takes inspiration from Europe's General Data Protection Regulation. Thank you. We now stand open for questions.
Very good. Thank you so much. And would you please put away any notes that you have? So I'd like to pick up kind of where you left off. It sounds like this panel doesn't believe that consumers are given a fair choice. But what responsibility do we place on citizens for making a decision of whether or not they want to enter into a business relationship with a private company? And agreeing to those terms of service? So should there be no responsibility on the citizen to make that determination?
The citizen should have some responsibility in that matter, but sometimes the citizen doesn't have a choice. Sometimes they're required by their job or their education system or a competition they would like to compete in. For example, this very competition, I would have to sign a Zoom privacy policy to join, and I definitely want to do this. This was not originally in the competition, but I still have to, now I have to do it. So essentially, sometimes it's unavoidable to these privacy policies.
What about something like social media, where you're signing up, and actually the stated purpose of that website is for you to share things publicly? Is that optional? What do we think about the expectation of privacy, which you touched on in your opening remarks?
Well, the intended purpose of those applications are to share things with your friends, and the California Consumer Privacy Act is not doing anything to prevent that. But what it is preventing is from that software, the app, Instagram, for instance, from using that data and selling it to other places. So there's a line that needs to be drawn between who you intend to see this information and who can reasonably be included in that privacy. Say, someone in your home versus someone spying in your window is an analogy that I would draw into real life.
Does the calculus change depending on circumstances? So, for example, in the current emergency resulting from COVID, do you, if you're a judge, do you put your thumb on the side of the scale in favor of government's ability to, say, track people, do things that under ordinary circumstances you would find was not lawful?
Well, this is a matter of wartime or emergency powers, which doesn't truly have a stated limit. Supreme courts often haven't intervened in the expansion of power by the executive branch, but we could, yes, see an expansion of power by the government to survey us more now that there's a pandemic.
Additionally, the majority of software programs used to track individuals are not directly feeding to the government's use of that information. The Google and Apple, the systems that they're currently building, would have applications that would simply tell an individual who has contracted COVID-19 and ask them if they want to alert everyone that they were, say, within 6 feet of, using that information. It's not necessarily used to broadcast to a large group of individuals publicly.
But why couldn't the government? I mean, the government, their laws say that if you're infectious, they can, force you to stay in your house or quarantine. Why shouldn't the government have the right to insist on this other kind of information?
Currently, the only scenario in which the government can track someone's phone or location history is through a warrant, and that precedent comes from Riley v. California. And it's really important that we maintain precedents so that presidents can't just break it in the future and use it unlawfully in times that we're not in an emergency.
What's the biggest threat to our privacy? Is it private business interactions, or is it the government, or is it the relationship between the government and the private? Is it sort of a workaround now to the protections that have existed?
The opinion of the panel is that that third option, that relationship between the private companies and the government. In 2010, the Inspector General of the Department of Justice reported that 78 million people were having their identities flagged coming from private companies and brought into the government just because they're saying they're being politically active online, and that's flagging them from. It's putting them last in lines for immigration, for all types of citizen rights that we should have.
And additionally, the relationship between surveillance of the government and businesses has always been interconnected, as revealed by Edward Snowden in 2013. The PRISM program mandated companies to release information to the government if they requested it, which while companies are now allowed to release that they've given information, the government can still do this. So they are still interconnected.
What if the government converted all of the street lights to cameras to monitor our movements?
That, in the opinion of the panel, that would not be considered a breach on privacy because per the decision in Katz v. US, the expectation of privacy includes people, not places. So filming a general area, a general public area, is not an invasion of privacy at all.
All right, and that's time. Very good. Thank you so much. You can take a breath or you're done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll give you a quick couple rounds of feedback. I'll start. I liked your prepared remarks. I thought you did a good job kind of focusing on the prompts within Posner's quote and kind of addressing each of them in turn and laying the groundwork of kind of the constitutional principles that underpin kind of how the case law has developed. And then I think ending on, the statement that companies are even worse than government, I wrote down, and they're not being kind of a fair choice of whether or not to enter into these contracts. So this is obviously what I do in my day job. Part of it is writing these terms of service for people that want to use our products and services. And Carl, I thought your point on the Zoom, the necessity of doing it for school, right? And so there are these weird intersections where it is hard to go through just like normal public life and the expectations on you as a citizen without kind of agreeing to some of these contracts, and teasing that out, I think, is going to be really, really tricky. Businesses are struggling with how to navigate laws like the CCPA, right? Facebook is free in part because they can sell data to advertisers. So how does that change the landscape in what our online presence looks like and what that benefit is of the bargain is that we make with companies that run services like that. So, but great job. Obviously, I would love to keep talking with you. It shows you are extremely prepared for this discussion. So thank you for that.
Yeah, so I agree with everything Caitlin said, and it just, so it was a very thought-provoking presentation, which is first shows that you guys have given a lot of thought to this. And these are not easy questions. These are not questions with obvious answers. But the thing that I think of, just to sort of segue off what Caitlin said, Peloton can afford to hire sort of very good lawyers to do their utmost to protect Peloton's interest, which is what sort of the ethical and professional obligation of Caitlin is to do. And it puts sort of individual consumers in a very difficult, there's definitely an asymmetry to it. And I think you guys, it puts a premium on your ability to organize, to put pressure on sort of your school district to say, well, wait a minute, you have to protect us from this and give us the advice we need. And I think we are just in the very early stage. I mean, I think you guys are going to be sort of dealing with these questions, frankly, your whole life. And it will be, it's your world, and it's going to be what you make of it. And but I think a fantastically good start from just the little bit I heard today.
Yeah, going third, there's a lot of things I agree with my colleagues who've already stated their comments. A couple other things that I just wanted to point out. I thought you had a particularly good discussion, and you spent some time with sort of the technical aspects of technology and how it interacts with privacy in a way that I could understand, and I suspect most people could understand that. Sometimes it's so complicated, or it's so detailed, that people just kind of ignore it and just say, "Oh, I'm just going to accept it for what it is." But I think you did a nice job in your opening of kind of following that thread to say, look, here's how it works and here's how it impacts your privacy, and not just sort of, it's worth paying attention to. And your other discussion on, wartime emergency powers, the idea of ebb and flow that the courts have looked at with executive power and government power, and to your response to the idea of the relationship between the government and private industry, and that's continuing to be an interesting dynamic that maybe the founders and the original documents didn't necessarily foresee that we're dealing with now, and how that those protections are coming into play in our overall structure. So I thought you did a really nice job and really enjoyed talking with you.